are back looking forward. Welcome to Looking Forward Show. You're listening to Philly Cam. This is Philly Cam Radio, WPPM LP. You're also listening to Philly Cam TV and watching us on live stream, Xfinity 66 and 966, Vios TV 29 and 30, Roku, Apple TV, and YouTube TV. And I am Jeff Abramowitz, your host, and really excited to be here today. We have a great show for you today. I'm thrilled that the guests were able to jump on. We have joining us today our regular guest, Lou Narvaez, Regional Director of Pennsylvania Probation and Parole. We have Will Latif Little. We have Stacy Mandel from Bubbles and Flashlights. And today it really is all about mind over matter. Mind over matter is a great topic. We're going to be dealing with talking about mindfulness and the approach of mindfulness and the importance of it in both our criminal justice system and reentry systems that we have in play. So really excited. But first, as always, I'd like to just catch up on a few things. And I'm grateful to be here because so much has happened over the last few weeks that I wanted to share. So first, I guess I should start with some of the interesting things that have happened. One is that I was in Washington right after our last show. I left to go to Washington, D.C. for the Barbara Bush Foundation for Family Literacy had an event in Washington, D.C. at the National Summit on Adult Literacy, and the Coalition on Adult Education, which I'm on the board of directors of, received an award at the Kennedy Center. And most intriguing about that visit was the fact that I had a chance to meet the First Lady of the United States, and she got to speak at the event and share her view of family literacy and the importance of literacy throughout our country. So it was really a great event. I had so many other little things pop up over the last few weeks that I really wanted to share. One was a thing called GPLEX. So for those of you that have never heard of it, GPLEX it's done by the Economy League. It's an event that takes over two and a half days in Philadelphia, and it brings together leaders from all different industry sectors. And we talk about how we can improve the systems that are in play in our city of Philadelphia and around the country as well. So GPLEX has a fun part of it because it's not just listening to people, but there's a travel piece of it where you get to go around Philadelphia and see some really cool things. So the part that I signed up for, or the trip that I signed up for, was workforce development driven. And we went to the old Bud plant in North Philadelphia. And we got to see firsthand what's going on in the Bud plant and how they're resurrecting this whole section of North Philadelphia to make it really an amazing facility where industry is going to be there, and there's a housing component going up, and there's also some restaurant space being built. And you know what? The community itself is being engaged in the entire development plan. So I was really excited to see that. We went from there down to the Naval Shipyard, where I got to witness and see a company called Iovance, which is a biopharmaceutical company doing some remarkable things with cancer treatment and cancer drugs. So saw their startup and got to see all the great things that were happening down in the Naval Shipyard. So kind of interesting and a great event, great way to learn about the city and see things that are on or should be on our radar screen moving forward. Over the weekend, I got to participate in Philadelphia Fight. The Institute for Community Justice had an Arts at Resistance. They had a whole exhibition of tremendous art that was done from Philadelphians, and they had a panel on reentry, and I got to participate in that panel, and boy, was it impactful. We really talked about things that were affecting reentry and criminal justice in the Philadelphia community and ways that we could be doing things better. So I'm very excited about that. We finished up my Getting Talent Back to Work class with Andrea Lopez from Temple University. This was a 4-week class that we gave for HR specialists around the country. And we really dove deep into how we can hire the untapped talent of men and women that have gone through our justice systems and are coming back and are really worthy of hiring from an employment perspective. So we talked all about that. And so many other little things, but I'm glad to be here. We have a great show. I don't want to waste a lot of time, but our first guest is going to be up next, and we'll be right back with Looking Forward Philadelphia. welcome back to Looking Forward. So our first guest has been religiously on the show since it started. Lou Narvaez is the regional director for Pennsylvania Probation and Parole. How are you, Lou?
Hey, I'm fine, Jeff, and thank you once again for having me here. I'm doing well, and hopefully the same is true for you and yours.
Yeah, everything is great. We're all doing well, and you've been religiously on this show since it started, since we were a radio show, and so we should be really transparent that you are downstairs in one of our studios, which is I'm upstairs in our radio studio, but he's
Right,
downstairs, and I
right.
don't get to actually see him and shake his hand, but I do get to enjoy your company on the radio and on our television show. And I wanted to first catch up with you about a lot of things. But first of all, what's going on at the DOC level and how are things at probation and parole?
Well, things are going very well. Something similar to your GPLEX initiative that you were involved in. We had an initiative with the workforce development with various providers, which your schedule understandably didn't allow you to participate. However, you were invited. We had various people at the table who are employers. We had people from the Bureau of Community Corrections. I had many of my agents and the supervisors, and we had a real down to earth discussion about employment. And some of the things that parole that we stress that we are pro employment because we understand that if a person is able to, at minimum, sustain themselves in the community, that's a beginning to their successful reentry. We bend over backwards to make sure that people can go to work, that people can maintain a job. Um, we have people that fall within different categories that come to us. There's some people that are unemployable. There's some people that can only be employed part time. And then part of not all of the focus is that we have to make sure that you're in position to be employed. In other words, if you have a substance problem, we try to have that addressed initially so that when you go to the job, you're clean. If you have issues with anger management, we make sure you get certain type of treatment. And part of our structure is we have units, if you will, of agents that are specifically assigned to mental health, to sex offenders, to the various populations we service so they can concentrate their efforts on the needs that the person have to help them maintain their employment or get a job.
Yeah, sometimes when you come home, you're just not ready to work yet, right?
Right,
There's other issues going on, like, you need
right,
some behavioral health support or you need
right.
general health care and those kinds of things. And I often say that one of the biggest challenges is putting somebody to work when they're not ready because you're kind of setting
Absolutely.
them up for failure, right?
Absolutely. And part of it is you have to remember too, a large majority of our population was not employed prior to going into the institution. Their employment was what they did on the street, which we tried to have them avoid returning to that type of environment of a negative business world, if you will, a business world nonetheless. But we try to stir them away from that. So if I've never had a job, a legitimate job, now it's about learning a skill, learning how to interact with people in a different type of settings. Um, and we have people that agents that will meet with employers. We have specialized trained agents that will meet with employers. So listen, this guy, we're working with him to know what it means to let's be to work on time. Let's look presentable. Let's make sure we're using the appropriate language when we're interacting with people on the job. Let's not do inappropriate things. And that within itself is a journey. And in some people that may seem to be very simplistic, but if you never had a job and never had to look at, which we'll get into later when you talk about mindfulness, if you never had to look at yourself and be true to yourself or be real, then these are things that become challenges.
Yeah.
They become obstacles for you.
For sure, for sure. So I'm curious when we talk about mindfulness, and first of all, was anything else high on your radar screen you wanted to talk about? I know as far as just updating from the DOC level, I know that Secretary Little is in
Yes,
office and taking over, and
right.
really I was grateful that we had him on our show. I actually sent him a congratulations, and he shot me back a quick. That means that he's got to be on my show again. Note
Okay. Oh,
saying he wanted
yes,
another shot to come on, which is really
right.
nice.
Right.
Um,
He is now at the helm, Secretary George Little, and He was the executive deputy secretary of reentry. He's very pro reentry, but now he's wearing multiple hats. He's always wore a lot of hats, and he's in charge of the DOC, and that's the larger umbrella. Parole comes under that umbrella, state parole. Bureau of Community Corrections comes under that umbrella. So he has many hats that he wears, but he's always open. He's very objective and very forward thinking. So, well, you've met with him, so you've had that opportunity to have.
I have. He's a good guy. He's a really good guy, very down to earth. So I want to, and I had met him years ago when I first came out, and he gave me some time and space to talk to him, and it was really nice.
Right.
I want to talk about mindfulness because really the topic of the show today, and I know it's something you're passionate about as well. But
yes,
I want to talk in two aspects. The first, I want to talk about it from just the justice aspect. And I know parole officers have a stressful job, and they're on the streets, they're doing some of the hard work. And I think we often don't. We look at the reentry, we talk about criminal justice and justice in our show, but I'm not sure we often give enough credit to the challenge that your officers have in doing the work that they're doing. So I was wondering if you could talk about your perspective on mindfulness for your agents, and then a little bit about mindfulness for the reentrant, people coming home.
Sure. So before we can begin that conversation, I think there's some very preliminary things we must lay a foundation for. Number one is we're talking about intentional. You're being intentional, and you're cultivating awareness, which is what my agents do. Your attention is on what's in the present, what's going on right now, and your attitude is you're being non-judgmental. That's the groundwork for the mindfulness. And when you look at this contextually, as far as the historical perspective, it's really amazing because you have to remember that the prison systems, the origins began in a penal-based philosophy. Penal meaning punitive. That's the basis of the whole. That's so systemic that it was in that system that you were sent there to be punished. That was the concept. But that concept is also consistent when you look at the philosophy that we have in the Western philosophy. In the Western philosophy, it's based on the rugged individual, the survival of the fittest, these different concepts, manifest destiny. Now, fast forward, and you look at, it was a mindful justice initiative that came out of a collaboration in 2015 with the Lentz Foundation for American Buddhism. Now, I'm not going to go through a whole dialogue on Buddhism, but it's closely tied with concepts of Taoism, because Buddhism dealt with the rebirth, enlightenment. Taoism is dealing with achieving balance, and that all creatures, and that's how they put it, are subject to be respected. They need to be respected. So you merge those two, you get what you know out of Taoism, where they had this concept, I am armed with the knowledge that anger masks fear. And fast forward, many of our clients deal out of a premise of fear. And the fear is that they're masking this image, this persona that they had to keep on the street to survive, the persona they had to keep on in the institution to survive. So now I have to continue with this, for lack of better words, this image of machismo. I got to show I'm all man. I don't cry. I'm not afraid, blah, blah, blah. That comes to the whole concept of mindfulness. My agents are taught, when they come into me, I tell them immediately, I say, everybody comes through that door is grown up. Everybody's a man or a woman. They made poor choices. The choices lives here. Now, from our previous conversations, Jeff, that I'm a firm believer that there are people who are in institutions and jails in particular that shouldn't be there. But I'm also a firm believer that there are people that are in institutions that do belong in institutions. Now, I am not saying that should be the end all. I'm saying that, which this conversation is great, brings to play that what do you do with a person when they enter an institution? That's when the reentry begins. That's when the mindfulness begins, where it's to cultivate their awareness, not from a judgmental point of view, because what happens, everyone that's in an institution, in a correctional institution, they've committed a crime, not because we say so, because the system has said so, the system has found them guilty. And this, not for nothing, can be the worst point in a person's life. None of us, you, me, any of the guests, none of us want to be judged by our worst acts in our life. However, someone that has been incarcerated, that carries them as a stigma. They're captured by the worst decision they've ever made in their life. And that becomes part of the scarlet letter, if you will, that carries them around. What happens with mindfulness is when you talk to a person, you talk to them like, you ever think about when somebody says, oh, don't get mad? Well, if your emotions in that moment lead you to anger, you're telling the person, well, don't be in tune to your emotions. What we have to do is in that moment is to try to redirect their anger. Not that don't get mad, but this is how we need to look at where you're going. Now that goes to that whole concept of the yield theory. And the yield theory, as the Tao said, with it is a strength and ability to yield to others. And now I don't know if you've ever heard of Dr. Christian Conti, and
Hmm.
he's a very strong advocate and instructor in the yield theory. And this is why I told you earlier when you brought this on as a topic, it was very interesting to me because former Secretary Wetzel has had Dr. Conti meeting with our leadership teams. We'd meet every week as we were working through COVID because we had to be mindful of the moment. We had to be aware of our circumstances. We had to be aware of how we were dealing with people. We had to be able to look at the situation and develop a plan based on looking at the needs of others without being judgmental as well as our other needs. So
That's
when you
really
look,
hard to do.
it
It's really hard
is
to do, especially in this context, not only from your agent's end, but from the reentrance end and from people that are involved. And I think part of the challenge is this notion of self-respect, like being able to forgive yourself, being able to understand and figure out, what led you to make those choices, and then putting
absolutely.
putting things in that perspective. It took me a long time to be able to forgive myself for some of the choices that I made in my life, but understanding it was all part of my journey. It wasn't so much about the choice; it was about the lessons that I could learn from them. And I spent a lot of time when I was away really looking into myself, and I'm wondering what part that self respect piece comes in, and how much of that, for not only officers doing the work, but for people coming home, how important that is in this whole picture of justice and coming back and not recidivating and not going back.
Well, see, part of it, and what you're saying is right on point, Jeff. Part of it is that our entire socialization process, if you for 1 minute remove the incarceration, which we will add back in, our entire socialization process brings us with a lot of luggage. That concept of good and bad. Uh, and I do not say this disrespectfully. In some religions, the guilt is part of the process of giving thanks. You have to feel guilty for what you have done, opposed to you have to understand what you have done and why you shouldn't do it again or why you should look at things differently. When our agents go through what we call BTA, which is the Basic Training Academy, they learn all the processes and the laws that and what they're allowed to do and not allowed to do. The greatest trainer I see for them is when they come on. We had advocated a couple of years ago for on the job training where they're working with other agents in addition to going to the academy, but also going out in the community. Part of the mobility issue, and you've met Deputy Secretary Stevens, is you have to be in the community of the people you service. And that's part of the whole yield theory. That's part of mindfulness because it's meeting a person at the place they're in mentally as well as physically.
Yeah.
There are
So
many.
and
Mhm.
all the things that you've said over the time we've worked together, I guess one of the most impactful for me is when you let me know that your agents were meeting individuals at their home and that they were on the street and weren't requiring people to go to your offices, because I think them seeing where people live and understanding that
Absolutely.
community is such an integral part that we've missed for so long.
Absolutely. See what happens. There was, and I can't remember who back in the movement, now I'm dating myself because I'm a product of the 60s. Um, the movement used to identify the ivory castles where people go into with their three piece suits and their button down shirts and ties and shiny shoes, and removing themselves from the reality of the people that they service. If I meet you in your place, I am seeing, I am experiencing the now of what you living. So when I tell you next time, you know, well, why didn't you get here on time? Oh, maybe I'll have a pause or a moment because I've been in your house. I've seen there are no clocks. I've been in your house and seen that maybe there's no food to feed everybody. My getting to your office was an accomplishment. Yes, in time, I want you to get there on time. Absolutely. But it's about being in that moment with that person. During COVID, tribute to all my agents, where other agencies have stopped, all my agents were in the field because they're all mobile. They have cars, they have iPhones, they have iPads, they have files that electronically filed. They were going out, and I was down in some teams that should be traditionally 8 or 9 a team. I was down to one people because they were getting exposed to the COVID, but
Yeah,
they kept doing what they had to do. It's
yeah,
critical when we look at mindfulness. We take it in relationship to the totality of the environment we live in. There are people who have never been incarcerated, but who are more in jail than the people who are incarcerated because they have the shackles on their mind that have not allowed them to become aware and cultivate their awareness of the self. When a person is in the institution, it's unfortunate that they have that as the precipice to begin that journey of the self, but it's necessary. The things that my agents are trying to instill upon them is how it's okay to be a citizen that works, that takes care of their family, that takes care of themselves because well-being is something that's really necessary, and try to contribute to community they came from. That's a journey, and oftentimes the journey is more satisfying than the destination.
often it is. For me, it was. That's for sure. Destination wasn't so good, but we're
Right.
there. We're there now, and I have to tell you, this is an important topic. It's important both behind the walls and as people get out. And I think mindfulness and mind over matter, the whole concept of being
Absolutely.
mindful is something that we really need more in our justice space. So, as always, Lou Narvaez, thank you so much for being with us today.
My pleasure. My
And
pleasure.
we look
Thank you.
forward to you jumping on. You're welcome to stay on today if you can. But we're gonna head out. This is Looking Forward. You're on Philly Cam TV, live streaming on Xfinity 66 and 966, Fios TV 2930, Roku, Apple TV, and YouTube. And tomorrow we'll be airing on WPPM LP Philadelphia 106.5 FM. Next up is going to be Will Latif Little, and you don't want to miss our next guest. We'll be right back. At Looking Forward, and I have my friend Will Latif Little on. How are you, Will?
I'm great, Jeff. How are you?
I am well. It's great to see you. It's great to see you. I don't even know where to start with you because you know what? We've been friends for a little while. We've worked together. We've bumped into each other in a number of different places, and every time I pull up information to just find out a little bit more about you, I'm just in awe. But one thing struck me when recently that I saw on your website that had a line on there that I still, and I know you've said it before at events that I've been at, I've heard you speak at, but you had a line on there: "Those who fail to plan to fail." And I just love that when we talk about reentry. But Will, you've done so much. You're a storyteller, you're a TEDx, you've been on TEDx, you are an instructor, you're an author, you just wear so many different hats. I wonder if you could share a little bit about yourself and who you are with our audience, because I think they'd be intrigued.
Okay, my name is Will Latif Little. Right now, I am a national speaker and life coach and also an author. And I facilitate classes in the city of Philadelphia on topics called emotional intelligence and a curriculum that I created myself called the Human System, basically dealing with personal development. I came from North Carolina, a real short. My mother moved to Philadelphia from North Carolina because a domestic situation with her and my father. I grew up here with my sister, my mom's, my grandmother, and being the only boy in the household. It's a lot of things that came to cross my mind, figuring myself out, figuring out what is a boy or what is a man, and those particular things that's going on, the struggles my mom faced with her trauma too as well. And after seeing all those things growing up in this kind of environment in the city, which we're from down south, so grew up in the city here in Philadelphia, I had to really find my own way and my own direction, be my own person. Also, being an introvert, I was always quiet, just observe different things that's going on in my home and in my environment, in my community. Got into a lot of fights in school because I was well reserved, because I was a quiet kid. So most of the bullies always try to pick on me. And then because my mother, struggled a lot to take care of 5 children on her own, we moved around the city from South Philly to North Philly to West Philly to Southwest, back to South Philly, back and forth. So, we was just moving around a whole lot. And I went to different schools, probably 6, 7 different elementary schools all around the city, settled down in South Philly, back there again, and grew up with my mom and my grandmother going back and forth. And just a lot of things I was just faced with, a lot of challenges I was faced with at a young age. I was just trying to figure things out for my own self. My mom was still getting into relationships with men who was very abusive. And one moment in my life, where as though I came back home to live with my mom at 13 years old, she got into a fight with her boyfriend at the time. I was there, and I was a little older this time, so I wasn't going to run in the room like I normally would do as a kid when I heard a loud voice or some screaming. This time I went in the room, approached the guy, and then we got into a little wrestling match or fight. Took me outside and asked me, did I want to become a man, or do I think I'm a man? I said, yes, I'm a man. I was like 13 years old. I was probably like 5'8" at the time, real slim, probably 150 pounds or less. He pulled a gun out on me and put it right in my face and told me never to jump in a fight with him and my mother again. So I believe at that point, there was a shift in my mindset with a lot of anger, frustration, and violence, and a lack of fear of death. Because after he walked away, a lot changed in me. And I didn't realize it changed in me until I started getting older and now I'm venturing out in the streets, no longer afraid of different things I used to be afraid of, and just giving up really on life and survival basically. So I wound up getting to the drug game, hustling. Got kicked out of one school, South Philly High. I went to another school in West Philly High. I kicked out of that school, just not really just following orders basically. Went to University City, whereas I just dropped out of school altogether. And I let my mother know I dropped out of school, and I chose to trade. Already was a trade of selling drugs. At that time, drugs was really heavy, coke, and crack cocaine. I began to venture on the street more with my friends, my crew, my team, and we got into altercations and fights. And eventually, I did a lot of different things. Never got caught for robbery, stealing, burglary, and everything else. I wound up getting locked up for homicide at the age of 19 years old. I was facing the death penalty first because of so many charges we had, and then boy down to a life in prison, and eventually got stuck in Holmesburg prison, which was the worst prison in the state of Pennsylvania. Very violent, very rough situation, and in that place is where I really found myself. I began to do some soul searching. Once my son was born, because my girlfriend was pregnant at the time I got arrested. 9 months later, my son was born. I was a father. I had something to actually live for and care about more so than I cared about myself. He became my why. And with that why, I started really self-reflecting and trying to figure out why I became this person who didn't care about my life or the life of anybody else's, or not even caring about the worries of my mom, my sisters, being the only child, her only son. And really start focusing on me, my guilt, my shame, my anger, my fear, my trauma, And in the prison, you really don't have those kind of tools or no kind of instructor or no kind of coach or no kind of counselor to really help you in those particular dark areas and dark moments in your life. So I really had to go cold turkey on my own and really like, dig a little deeper within myself. And unfortunately, I found myself in there in that dark place within myself, and that was the best part of me, who was already embedded in me. And you know that there's no one better than you. You don't compare yourself to other people. It's always you versus you. The only person that's better than you was the person embedded in me. And I had to pull that person out. And I began to go back to school. Got my GED while I was in prison. And then as I started really working more and more on myself and educated myself to a point where as though now I become a speaker, now I become a coach, and I become a teacher in prison. I was doing this to young men who was going through some emotional problems, because that's a really terrible emotional place right there you could be in at the time. And I knew the only way I could really change if I changed myself in that place. Didn't know my feet, if I was gonna get out of prison or not at the time.
Yeah, so we gotta unload some of that
Yeah,
because
yeah.
yeah, it's an amazing story, and I so appreciate the reality that it took prison for you to find yourself. Look, I was 50 years old when I was in prison, and it took me 50 years to find myself, and it took me losing everything that I had gained all my life before I got perspective on what the meaning or my purpose in life was. But how was it that you were able to get out? How long? How was it you came out of prison?
Well, the case with the trial, I eventually got found guilty of third-degree murder and got sentenced to 10 to 20 years. Did the 10 years, got out in 1998 in the halfway house, stayed in the halfway house for about 8, 9 months, and then I was released.
And it was the same halfway house I was at, wasn't it?
Yeah, yep, 10th Street.
It was. Yeah, I think we were there. I think we might have missed each other there, or might have connected while we were inside there. So you came home, and I think people should understand the scope of what you do now, because it's kind of remarkable how not only have you changed your life, but you've touched so many men and women and children and people across the country, not only locally here in Philadelphia. Can you share a little bit about the work you do?
Well, what I do right now, I'm teaching basically what I call the human system, and it's mainly deeper, looking deeper inside to an individual person and helping them walk down a dark path that they don't normally want to walk through, or they can't walk through by themselves, and kind of shift their mindset to give them a whole different perspective on life in general. And I know it's just about enlightening individuals about themselves. Self-awareness is key. Like that's one of my key components for me to help me transform my life into the person I am today and continue on growing. But just more so looking at yourself. We have a lack of self-identity. And that's one of the problems that we have in our society, where as though we trying to be other than who we are or who we truly are, because we don't know who we truly are or what we're truly capable of becoming. So emotional intelligence, neuroscience, a little bit thoughtfulness, mindfulness, and also understanding just the physical human system and how all that is connected to each other, and even how we're connected to also the creation around us in the universe.
Yeah, so some of your approach is really focusing on, I guess, four principles, right? Self-awareness, self-management, self and social awareness, and this thing of empathy.
Right.
When we talk about mindfulness in the context of people that have gone through the system, or even people professionally like Mr. Narvaez or others, when we talk about mindfulness, what comes to mind for you, as far as what is mindfulness, and what are the things you want people to understand about the concept, and what's important?
Well, when I think about mindfulness, is more so to understand the power of your mind. The power of your mind is you have the tool, right? That's the number one asset we have as human beings. So understanding the capabilities your mind have, and also understanding how to use it in a way that you can navigate better through life. Now, the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, people don't know that mental program, right? To even shift their paradigm, to even change their lives. So just giving more language to that, more understanding to that when it comes to mindfulness, understanding that you are not your mind too as well, because a lot of people have a lot of overthinkers and they think that the things that run through their mind are them, and just understanding, giving more awareness to how the mind works. So mindfulness is understanding how your mind works. How can you hack your brain for success, opposed to being learning all these different things, just picking up behavior. And when you're picking up behavior in a community of survival, you're only going to pick up survival tools. So understanding that you have the tools to navigate through life properly, to live, not just survive, but to live. So that's understanding your mindset and how you change your mindset, how you use your mind to be able to navigate better and better practice, and how you become more positively productive, not thinking more negative than more positive.
Will, have you been working? Do you work with individuals just when they come home, or are you doing any work behind the walls?
Well, I've done work behind the walls, especially on State Road. I did like a tour on State Road. I did a program with the men on in house correction for like a year, where as though we had men come up to the chapel and we just spoke to them about things that's going on in their life and then help them navigate and just being real with themselves. A lot of them never had a real man-to-man talk before. And I found that to be surprising, which I never had one either because I grew up without my father. But a lot of things I learned just how to be a man, how to grow up. But I started having that conversation with men in house correction. A lot of them broke down in tears because they never really had that kind of conversation before. So it's just about just going to those prisons and showing people that it's possible. Like when I was younger, I was like, I knew there was something more for me. I knew there's something better that's offering me better. I just knew that I can be better than who I was. In that prison cell. And some of us don't even reach that thought process while we're in prison. We think this is all that's offered to us. This is all we got. And there's nothing else behind this. So just dig a little deeper and sharing my story with those guys and showing them how you can navigate through life, just giving them the right tools and giving them the instructions and directions on how to do that.
Good stuff. Good stuff. So Will tell us if somebody wanted to reach out to you to find out about programming that you do or getting some coaching, how would they reach you?
They can reach me on my website. There's at the bottom of my website is WillLatifLittle.com. Will, WILL, Latif, LATIF, Little. You can go on in, you can say book Will, and you can just go on in, you can just email me. It'll go straight to my email. And if you have any questions or anything you want to find out.
Will. Awesome. Will, thank you so much. We're going to be right back, but we'll hang in there because I want to have some discussion with you towards the end of the show. But our next guest, Stacey Mandel, Maxie's mom, as we refer to her. But Stacey Mandel's from Bubbles and Flashlights going to be on, and you're listening to Looking Forward. We'll be right back. Looking Forward, and our next guest, we know her. Actually, we know her daughter, and Maxie Mandel's been on our show before. She's an amazing artist who did some great music for us, and now we have the ability to have her mom on the show. Stacey, how are you? Oh, I think you're muted. There you go.
Sorry.
Technology. No worries. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. I'm so grateful to be here with you and your guests, your amazing guests.
Yeah, they are awesome. So I was going to read your bio, and I do it no justice whatsoever. But why don't you tell us a little bit about the work that you do and who you are and some of your background?
Yes. So a little bit about me. I'm somebody who did not serve time in prison. I'm going to just put that right out there. I was given everything in life handed to me on a silver platter in terms of the family I was born into, the resources we had, the affluence, not one ACE. So an ACE is an adverse childhood experience that is very much correlated to difficulties in life in every area. I didn't have any of those. If you go down my checklist, picture perfect life, quote unquote, on paper. And yet I was a kid who was always in trouble, and I got into a lot of trouble, and basically was able, through mainly mindfulness practice, actually mindfulness and meditation, was able to make some significant changes until I decided to dedicate to myself this full time to teaching mindfulness and meditation to others. And I work in all settings with adults and youth, but my main passion is really youth. I was a teacher and a coach of teachers in all types of schools, including the most underserved schools in our country, for almost 20 years total. And then my own experience too, being a kid who always felt different, who wasn't getting what I needed, even though I was given everything I needed. And just, paying attention to the world. I really, really feel like, in particular with youth, that there's a human rights and a civil rights issue here in terms of like education. Some of your guests touched on it, and Will was just touching on it about understanding your own mind, understanding the connection between your mind, your body, and your behaviors. And then the science that we have, the neurobiology, the neuroscience, we know about the way that we actually act is often not a choice. It's not like we're choosing everything that we're doing, and we can get into that. But I wanted to be part of, I guess, in a way, using my gifts that I was given and doing whatever I can to be part of the change, paying it forward.
Awesome. Yeah, it's really kind of remarkable because too many people, we talk about white privilege, but too many people go their whole lives and never really recognize it and understand it. And I'm one to call it out all the time because I lived it for a long time. And I'm curious, you mentioned meditation, and what's the differentiation or difference between mindfulness and meditation? Do they work together, or what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I tell people all the time, think about mindfulness like an umbrella. It's a big umbrella. And then meditation is like a raindrop under the umbrella. And there are lots of raindrops under the umbrella. So mindfulness is a way to just be mindful in one way. And in particular, it's a way to formally practice this skill of being mindful. Mindfulness is basically a way of paying attention. So paying attention in this moment in a kind, curious way. And so when you meditate, you're just carving out time to do that very intentionally. And I just did a training today. I was in Chester, actually, where I do a lot of my work. And I was leading a professional development training in the high school in Chester for the faculty that work with the most, quote unquote, emotionally disturbed, emotionally high emotional needs students with a lot of challenges. And so I was guiding them in some meditation, and it was their first time, a lot of them. And I said, look, there's a lot of different ways that my meditation can be practiced. It's been practiced for thousands and thousands of years across just about every culture. So you're going to have preconceived ideas about it, but really those preconceived ideas actually can often hinder us from practicing. And they did for me for a long time.
Yeah, so it's interesting too because I was reading a little bit about the work you did in the program, the School to Prison Pipeline, and this is in Delaware County, I believe, right? Yeah. The program is ESEL, Engaging, Support, Enriching Lives. And is that the program that you were working with today?
Yeah, so there's this advocacy organization called Delaware County Advocacy Resource Organization. One of the education advocates wrote a small little grant to help schools reduce their punitive practices, namely suspension, in order to combat the school to prison pipeline, because the data is very, very clear on that the people who are missing school are the people who are also in our prison cells. And there are other factors involved, of course. It's much more complex than that, but there is data on that. And again, going back to kids, and their brains and the way they're developing, and what we know about the science of trauma and how it impacts the brain, these youth are not empowered with enough knowledge about their own mind and body to actually choose a lot of times what they're doing. They're just reacting. They're staying alive, and I don't blame them. And I did it myself. I just didn't get in trouble.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting because I'll tell you, I've done some meditation behind the walls. I try to do it now. I don't do it as often as I should at home, but behind the walls, it was just put you in a different place where meditating behind the walls is time where you can really be anywhere you want to be and really look into yourself. With children, teaching that skill set of how to do that at an early age, I think has to be so impactful. How has it been for you? Have you actually seen the results of some of the work that you've done?
Yeah, so I don't work as much with young kids. I did dabble in that. I'm in the middle school mainly right now, third year on this particular grant project. The first year that I came in, Chester's been in upheaval. We actually just shot, I should just mention real quick, a short documentary film called, it's called Divided Attention, the children who need the most, when the children who need the most get the least. I think that's the title, and it should be coming out any second now. We're in the editing phase. And it's really about all the systems involved. But when I first came in, Chester was about to be the first public school district in the state of Pennsylvania to be completely privatized by charter schools. And so there was a lot of chaos. So it was like I was there, but no one even really knew what I was doing. There was no support. There's no administrative support, just fires being put out here and there every other second. Then last year there was COVID. So I was trying to do it all remotely, which is another whole story. And now I'm here on the third year doing it. And there's so much burnout and still so much chaos, and the charter saga is not over. I might as well put a shout out right now. I've been trying to create something called the M team, the mindfulness team, because I need more help. And I've always wanted this since the first year. COVID interrupted it. I'm looking for celebrity mindfulness champions, preferably local, from Philly, from Chester, but I'll take anywhere at this point. I've got Pat Croce, I've got some ball players.
You got Will Little now too.
What's that?
You got Will now too, right?
That would be great. Anybody who's willing to either make a video message, record it, just a minute, or come into the school, who believes in anything connected to social, emotional well-being, in particular, if they practice mindfulness in any way, not just the form of meditation, to share a little bit with these youth, so that I can start training some of these, a select crew, to lead the practices for their peers. So it's not just coming from me, it's coming from one of their own.
Good stuff. Good stuff. So how do people reach you if I know that you have Bubbles and Flashlights as the name of your company, but if they wanted to reach you to get more information or to join your M team, which I'm going to have to do, how would we reach you?
Yeah. So I'm reworking that name, Bubbles and Flashlights. That's when I did work with little kids, by the way. So it fit with the little kids. And now that I work with adults too, but for now it's bubblesandflashlights.com. And my contact info is on that. So you can also email me, bubblesflashlights@gmail.com.
Awesome.
But my contact information is there. And I would love to hear from anyone who's interested. There's a way for all of us to fit into pieces of this puzzle.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Stacey Mandel, thank you so much for joining us. Hang in there. I want to take a short break, and we're going to come back and bring you and Will on. I got some questions for both of you together. So we'll be right back. You're listening to Looking Forward. Looking forward, and I have really want to get into some of this with the two of you, and really talk a little bit about not only the work you're doing, but kind of understand what message you'd want to give to our audience. So I think mindfulness and the mindfulness practices that we engage in sometimes can be life altering. I was wondering if you guys could take a few minutes and just share a little bit about your perspective on, what do people need to know that maybe have never meditated, that have never really sat down and thought about how they could change themselves or really be self-reflective. So I'm going to open the floor up to both of you, and who wants to jump in the pool?
Ladies first.
Thank you, sir. I knew you'd say that. I could tell. So I would say, again, if you go back to like the key kernel of what mindfulness actually means, paying attention in this moment, and people might say in a non-judgmental way, I kind of put it out in the way of like curiosity and kindness. You're being here, you're meeting whatever's here, unless it's life-threatening. If it's life-threatening, if you're really in danger, you ain't gonna meet it. You're gonna just stay alive. But if it's anything else, no matter what, can you meet it? That basic kindness. And then being curious, we usually know. We've already got our minds made up, and for good reason, because we've had experiences, we've been taught certain things, we've hung around certain people our whole lives, and our minds are made up. So being curious means really, can you actually go beyond that a bit? Can you let in more, right? Can you not know everything? And I think that for me, the biggest thing I'd want to say is that mindfulness for me is about social action. It's about social justice, because when I'm really practicing, when I'm really paying attention in this way, and it's very imperfect, but when I am, and this is me speaking as the person that I am, how I look at me, there's a lot of hypocrisy. There's a lot of hypocrisy. And this is the only way that I really know of to, in an authentic way, face what we, how we judge others, what we preach, what we think we do really well, all of our opinions about everybody else. This is the only way I know to transform that.
Awesome. Good stuff. Good stuff. Come on, Will, give it to us.
I would say mindfulness is basically something that I learned from Wayne Dyer, is having a mind open to everything and not closed to nothing. And when you open, you're able to receive more. And that's just open myself even more. So I meditate a lot. I give a guided meditation in all my classes, beginning and end. I meditate when I work out too as well. So it's basically connecting to your higher self. And as I try to encourage people in the morning time when they get up, to swim in gratitude, meditate in gratitude, be thankful, be grateful, and be more optimistic in life. And the more you're optimistic, the more you raise your levels up, your vibration up to a higher way of thinking, a higher way of connecting, and just figure out who you got to become in order to get through the day, basically.
So those are both great answers. I guess the challenge that I have is, look, I was a lawyer by trade, and even now I look at, how do you quantify something? Like, how do you show the results of it? I guess that's one of the challenges I have with mindfulness. I know it because I live it. Like, I can meditate and I know how I feel, but how do I show its impact on society, on people, on the work that I'm doing? It isn't even necessary. Maybe it's just so individualized that it's up for every person to find their own mindfulness, their own place where they belong in the spectrum. But I'm curious, like if you, as you go for grants and as you go to make sure that your work gets funded and you build support, I do believe a person without data is just another person with an opinion. So I think that being able to show the impact of the work you do can be important, especially in the social sector. And I'm wondering how you think about it, or how should I think about it?
Well, how you should think about teaching mindfulness?
Yeah.
Okay. I think right now in this time that we're living in, with all the chaos and all the confusion, I think mindfulness is one of the practices that we must continue to have and continue to teach throughout our communities. Because our biggest muscle to flex is our mind. And if we're not able to strengthen that muscle, then every other muscle is irrelevant. I can be the strongest man in the world, but if I can't use my brain in a way that I can navigate through life trials and tribulations, then I'm not going to be no use to myself or no one else. Mm-hmm. So even like the mindset of an individual who's incarcerated, to transform that mind to see something better in himself, to see society as a place where as though he can give to something, not just take, but be able to give back something to as well, and to see things in a whole different perspective. And I think more so is understanding the mindset of an individual, where they're coming from, how they're thinking, to be able to change their perception is the key, with the steps they need to take in order for them to change their perception. Because it's all perception. Most of us thinking the way we feel or things that we're going through, we're the only ones going through it. Most of us thinking that things that happen only happen to us. But we all have the same problems. We just deal with them differently, and we feel different about them based on our mindset. So your mind is in your head for a reason. It's supposed to lead you, right? And if it's not leading you, what is leading you?
Good point.
Can I add to that?
Sure.
I just want to say too, totally, it doesn't really matter, honestly, like what the studies or the research shows, if it like feels good and if it changes things for you. However, there is hard data, Jeff. We have MRI scans of the brain pre and post mindfulness practice, showing amygdala, change activity changes in the amygdala, which is the fight, flight, freeze center of the brain. The part that's like always wired for threat. We can show that the gray matter in the brain gets completely reorganized. And it used to be after 8 weeks of mindfulness practice, we now know even one 12-minute mindfulness practice can change the brain. So like there's actual physiological evidence that we have, but then we have study after study after study. In 1980, because I show this stuff all the time, 1980, there were no studies, okay? Nothing really out there on mindfulness in the human body. Fast forward to 2020, there's almost 1,200 journal articles. American Mindfulness Research Association, it's the clearinghouse for all mindfulness research. So you've got that from everything, to like the common stuff like anxiety and depression to, pain management and everything in between. And then we've also, we've got places like Mexico. There's a prison in Mexico, Apodaca prison. It's one of the most violent prisons there is. And there have been articles, you can Google this, about that prison using meditation and totally transforming them from being one of the most violent centers to one of the most calm. San Francisco, there's a middle school there. It starts with a V and it's this Hispanic name and I can never pronounce it right. Again, they had like 38 neighborhood shootings in 1 year. 2 dead bodies found in the school playground. Really, it was called a fight school. So violent, completely changed their suspension rate, changed the whole climate in the school. And this is repeated in a lot of other places, not just these two. Those are just 2 examples.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
So before, we only got 2 minutes left. I'm just curious if you can give us really quickly, if I wanted to, I don't practice mindfulness. I'm out there. I don't practice mindfulness and I wanted to engage. What should I do?
And you wanted to what?
I wanted to engage and I wanted to start practicing. I wanted to either get into meditation, look at the mindfulness approaches. How would I do it?
Well, I think go to YouTube. It's the age
There
of
you go.
Find it. Go to YouTube, find a meditation music there, or find a guided meditation on YouTube. I have one on my own YouTube channel for individuals that I coach to as well, to go on there if they need help meditating, because it's hard for some people. And it's kind of new to our community, the Black and Brown community. Meditation is new, so just introducing that to a lot of people as a way to like calm themselves down, to get more centered, to get really focused on the things you're trying to accomplish. I think you can go to YouTube or get with a group. There are mindfulness groups out there who do meditation and stuff like that. Get with a group of people or find someone who actually does that.
And I know, Will, that you coach people. I don't know if it's in meditation, just that. I definitely coach people in mindfulness and meditation. But I would also add, if you try something and you don't like it, it doesn't feel right, and you're like, I'm not feeling this, don't give up.
There you go.
There are lots of different things. There are tons of apps, there are books, there are flashcards, like, YouTube videos, there are independent teachers, there are classes. You're also welcome to email me and just ask, look, I'm looking for something like this because I've already done this and I could point you in a direction. Ask people.
There you go. So Stacy and Will, thank you so much. Will Lateef Little and Stacy Mandel, Bubbles and Flashlights. And also we'll give a big shout out to Lou Narvaez, Regional Director at Pennsylvania Probation and Parole. It was great having both of you on the show. And we hope that everyone out there will look a little bit into the mindfulness practice. And remember that, it is a situation of mind over matter, and, start engaging. But reach out to our guests if you have any or want any more information on the mindfulness practices that are out there. And again, Will and Stacy, thank you so much for being on the show today. We're grateful for both of you, and also for Mr. Narvaez. You're listening to Looking Forward, and we'll be back in a few weeks. So have a good day.